Don't marry her. That's what a black boy, dirty from the streets and invisible to the world, said right at the church door. No one laughed out of politeness. No one listened out of respect. But that simple warning was just minutes away from destroying a millionaire wedding and exposing a scheme that only existed because everyone pretended not to see it. While the cameras filmed flowers, luxury, and eternal promises, a legal trap was ready to snap shut. And the most frightening part wasn't the plan itself. It was who was involved in it, the perfect bride. The respected lawyer. The name that never appears in public. And the certainty that after the ceremony, it would already be too late. Billionaire CEO Sebastian had everything lined up to walk into that church and walk out bound to an agreement he never consciously accepted. And the one who stopped him wasn't a friend, a business partner, or someone powerful. It was someone the entire system had taught him to ignore. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about how spectacle distracts, while the scheme unfolds far from the right eyes, and about the price of not listening to those who shouldn't be there. If you want to understand how this wedding turned into a scene of confrontation, pursuit, hidden evidence, and a silent downfall no one managed to stop, stay until the end. And subscribe to the channel, because here you'll hear stories that many prefer to keep buried. The church woke transformed into a stage, not a refuge. The ancient stones, marked by centuries of whispered promises, now supported a modern spectacle, made to be seen, recorded, and commented on. White flowers filled every corner, arranged with an almost aggressive perfection, as if any flaw were forbidden that day. The expensive perfume dominated the air, suffocating the scent of incense and any trace of spirituality. Cell phones appeared before faces, raised like natural extensions of hands. It was not a wedding. It was an event. Outside, the sound was not of emotion but of anticipation. Conversations were not about love, but about figures, contracts, alliances that went far beyond hands. Well-dressed people whispered with attentive eyes, as if evaluating a valuable asset about to be formalized. The church, which once welcomed silence, now welcomed judgment. Every smile seemed rehearsed, every gesture aware of an audience. The altar waited but commanded nothing. The true focus was on the staircase. When billionaire CEO Sebastian appeared, the atmosphere changed without anyone announcing it. It was not a loud change, it was dense. The kind of silence that happens when everyone recognizes power. The dark suit looked sculpted to his body with surgical precision. Nothing excessive, nothing lacking. On his wrist, a watch discreet enough for those who know its price. He walked calmly, not out of nervousness but out of habit. Space opened before him as if it already knew who he was. Phones automatically adjusted to follow him. Some people leaned slightly to see better. Others pretended indifference while recording with the front camera. Billionaire CEO Sebastian was not just the groom. He was the subject. To some, the ultimate symbol of success. To others, a social conquest. To almost no one, just a man about to get married. He carried on his shoulders expectations that had nothing to do with feelings. Discreet security positioned themselves without fuss, forming invisible corridors. The murmur faded not out of respect but focused attention. Every step he took was observed, analyzed, compared. Billionaire CEO Sebastian seemed comfortable in that role, like someone who had been watched his entire life. He did not smile too much, did not avert his gaze, did not seem anxious. There was a cold serenity about him, typical of someone accustomed to controlling environments. At the top of the staircase, billionaire CEO Sebastian stopped for a brief moment. Not to pray nor to take a deep breath. He stopped to look. His gaze swept over faces, cameras, calculated gestures. He saw flashes, curiosity, interest. What he did not see was emotional surrender. Perhaps he was not looking for it. Perhaps that was just another logical move within a life planned on invisible spreadsheets. Inside the church, the altar remained intact, oblivious to the theater outside. The flowers knew nothing of contracts, the walls knew no intentions. But the atmosphere gave everything away. This was not a simple celebration. It was a public performance with a silent script and an active audience. And even as the protagonist, billionaire CEO Sebastian did not yet know that this narrative was about to slip out of control. There was a strange feeling in the air, something that did not match the impeccable organization. Like a detail out of place, too small to draw immediate attention, but large enough to tear through the scene once it moved. No one commented, no one pointed. The cameras had not yet found that point. But the framing was about to change irreversibly. Billionaire CEO Sebastian took the first step toward the church door, confident that everything would proceed as expected. It was at that exact moment, when the script seemed solid and the spectacle under control, that the world decided to insert an unplanned element. Something that was not on the invitation, nor in the contract, nor in the plans. A body that did not belong in that setting. A visual error impossible to ignore. Before billionaire CEO Sebastian could cross the door and seal that moment before everyone, someone appeared where they should not exist. A contrast so striking it seemed to displace the very air around it. And without knowing it yet, that detail out of place was about to turn that carefully staged spectacle into something entirely different. The boy appeared like an editing error in the perfect frame of that day. No one announced his arrival, no one made space, no one seemed prepared to see him there. He stood a few meters below the staircase, too small to draw attention at first glance, too out of place to go unnoticed. The oversized hoodie hung over a thin body marked by lack of rest and regular meals. The dirt on his clothes was not neglect, it was survival. He did not match the marble, the flowers, the suits. He was a foreign body in a setting that demanded uniformity. For a brief moment he was ignored. Eyes passed over him as if he were part of the urban landscape, a detail too common to deserve focus. People adjusted cameras, commented on dresses, watched billionaire CEO Sebastian. The boy existed in that space the same way he always existed in the world. Present but invisible. The difference was that, on that day, invisibility would not last long. There was something in his posture that was neither pleading nor fearful. It was waiting. He held no sign, did not extend his hand, did not approach the guests. He simply watched. His attentive eyes followed the movement at the church entrance, the security guards, the flow of important people. There was an unusual concentration for someone so young. A focus that did not match someone who should only be trying to survive. His face revealed exhaustion but also resolve. As if he were there not by chance but by mission. Some people began to notice. First with discomfort, then with silent disapproval. Whispers arose, sidelong glances, expressions of displeasure. It was not hatred, it was something colder, the sense that that boy did not belong in that space. Their world worked better without uncomfortable reminders. And he was exactly that. A living reminder of everything that did not fit into that spectacle. The contrast was more disturbing than the dirt. While the guests displayed expensive fabrics and imported perfumes, he carried on his body the smell of the street, of poorly slept nights, of improvisation. The social divide screamed without him saying a single word. Even so, the boy did not retreat. He did not avert his gaze. He did not shrink. He remained there, steady, as if he knew that this was the only moment he would be heard. Billionaire CEO Sebastian had not yet noticed his presence. The cameras followed another focus, eyes were fixed on the main spectacle. But the boy watched every step, every gesture, every movement of those approaching the church door. It was as if he were waiting for an exact signal. A specific instant. Something that needed to happen before it was too late. A security guard cast a quick glance in the boy's direction, assessing whether to act or ignore him. For now, ignoring seemed easier. After all, he was not causing trouble. Yet, the danger was not in what he did but in what he seemed to know. There was an invisible tension in the air, as if that small body carried a weight that did not match his age. The boy took a deep breath, like someone preparing to cross a point of no return. His fingers curled inside the oversized sleeves of the hoodie, hiding trembling hands. Not from fear but from anxiety. He was not there to ask for help. He was there to interrupt something. And that, even without words, was already beginning to unsettle. As the murmur grew and cell phones continued recording everything except what truly mattered, the boy took a step forward. A simple movement, almost imperceptible but loaded with intention. It was the first sign that he would not remain invisible for much longer. Something was about to break the perfect flow of that event. And before any guest could react, before billionaire CEO Sebastian definitively crossed the line between the outside and the altar, the boy placed himself exactly where no one expected. At the point where he could no longer be ignored. In the place where the spectacle would begin to fail. The boy's movement was fast enough to cause unease, but slow enough to be seen by everyone. He took 2 steps forward and positioned himself directly in front of the church door, exactly where billionaire CEO Sebastian would step next. The murmur turned into layered silence, as if someone had lowered the volume of the environment without warning. The cameras, which until then had been searching for beautiful angles, instinctively turned toward the unexpected. For the first time that day, something was not under control. The boy's voice cut through the air without asking permission. It was not a desperate shout, it was a firm warning. Short. Direct. Don't go in, it's a trap. The words echoed more than they should have, perhaps because no one expected them to come from someone like him. There was no time for interpretation. The sentence landed in the space like a heavy object, impossible to ignore. Some guests laughed nervously. Others froze. Billionaire CEO Sebastian stopped mid-step at the same instant. Not out of fear but out of instinct. The kind of instinct that men accustomed to critical decisions develop over a lifetime. Something in that scene did not feel like a simple provocation. The boy did not tremble, did not avert his gaze, did not seem confused. He stared at billionaire CEO Sebastian as someone trying to prevent an irreversible mistake. The security guards reacted almost automatically. Two of them stepped forward, bodies tense, hands ready to act. The boy began to be seen not as an uncomfortable presence, but as a threat to order. Someone whispered, "Get him out of here." Another asked for calm. The event needed to continue. The script did not allow for human interruptions. One of the guards tried to grab the boy's arm, but he dodged without aggression. He remained standing, firm, occupying that space as if it were non-negotiable. "You can't go in," he repeated, now with a lower voice but even more certain. It did not sound like a plea. It sounded like certainty. And certainties coming from the wrong place tend to frighten. Some guests began filming more intently. It was no longer a beautiful wedding. It was a potential viral moment. The embarrassment spread quickly. No one knew whether this was a staged scene, a provocation, or a social breakdown broadcast live. The church, which until then had been a stage, turned into an improvised courtroom. Billionaire CEO Sebastian kept his gaze fixed on the boy. There was something uncomfortable about that posture. It was not defiance nor arrogance. It was urgency. An urgency that did not fit with performance. Billionaire CEO Sebastian opened his mouth to speak, but the boy interrupted him with a small, almost respectful gesture, asking for just a few seconds. That was enough to freeze the scene even more. "They're going to bind you to something you won't be able to undo," the boy said without raising his voice. There was no direct accusation, only a warning. The words explained nothing but implied everything. And in environments of power, insinuations are often more dangerous than clear accusations. The lawyer, standing a few meters behind, took a step forward, visibly irritated. This had already crossed the acceptable line. A wedding cannot be interrupted by a child from the street. At least it shouldn't. Social logic screamed for this to be ended immediately. The security guards closed in. The atmosphere, once one of elegant anticipation, was now one of open tension. The boy was about to be removed by force. Billionaire CEO Sebastian felt the weight of the moment piling onto his shoulders. If he moved forward, he would ignore the warning. If he stepped back, he would create a scandal. And it was at that moment, with everyone waiting for the next order, that billionaire CEO Sebastian did something no one expected. Instead of ordering them to proceed, he raised his hand, stopping the security guards. That simple gesture completely changed the course of the situation. But what he would say next was still far from calming anything. Billionaire CEO Sebastian took a deep breath and made a discreet gesture with his hand, asking for space. Silence spread again, this time heavier. He leaned slightly forward, moving closer to the boy, like someone trying to solve a problem without drawing even more attention. His voice came out controlled, low enough to sound rational, loud enough to be heard by those nearby. He did not want a confrontation. He wanted to end it quickly. "How much do you want to go away?" he asked, without irony, without contempt. It was a practical question, the kind that usually worked. Money always worked, especially in public situations. Some people nodded as if that were the obvious solution. An inconvenience solved with the most efficient tool they knew. Billionaire CEO Sebastian extended his hand, signaling to one of the security guards. The guard discreetly opened his wallet, ready to act. The gesture was almost automatic, rehearsed through years of similar situations. The logic was simple: solve the problem before it grew. Some guests relaxed their shoulders, relieved. The spectacle seemed about to get back on track. This would be just a strange story to talk about later. The boy looked at the outstretched hand, then at billionaire CEO Sebastian. There was no glimmer of desire in his eyes. No hesitation. No shame. He did not step back, did not move closer, did not change his posture. He simply shook his head slowly in refusal. The simple gesture was more unsettling than any shout. For the first time, something did not respond to money. "That's not it," the boy said calmly. The sentence landed like a calculation error. Billionaire CEO Sebastian frowned slightly, surprised. The refusal made no sense within the rules he knew. People refused money out of pride, out of anger, as a game. But there was none of that there. There was urgency. "I don't want charity," the boy continued. "I want to stop you from going in." The words were spoken without aggression, but with an uncomfortable firmness. Some guests exchanged confused looks. This was no longer a social problem, but something more serious. A direct warning. The lawyer cleared his throat behind billionaire CEO Sebastian, clearly impatient. The scene was slipping out of control and gaining a dangerous meaning. A boy refusing money in front of cameras was not a good sign. It did not fit any narrative. It could not become a symbol. Billionaire CEO Sebastian slowly withdrew his hand. For the first time since he arrived, there was something different on his face. It was not fear. It was doubt. The refusal had created a crack in the logic of the moment. If it was not money, then what was it? What did that boy really want? Some cell phones moved even closer. The embarrassment began to turn into collective curiosity. The audience felt it was witnessing something that did not happen every day. A real standoff. Power that did not work. And that made everything even more dangerous. The boy took a deep breath as if preparing to cross a point of no return. The security guards exchanged quick looks, uncertain how to act. Billionaire CEO Sebastian kept his eyes fixed on him, waiting for an explanation that would justify that unlikely refusal. Then the boy slightly lifted his chin and said that money could not buy what was about to happen inside. And before anyone could interrupt him, it became clear that the next sentence would not be just a generic warning. It would be something that struck directly at those who truly held power in that setting. The movement drew attention even before she was seen. A slight shift in glances, a whisper that spread faster than any formal warning. Then Susanna appeared at the top of the staircase like someone entering the scene at a precisely calculated moment. The light-colored dress seemed to capture the light effortlessly, designed for flawless photographs. The smile came before the words, trained, controlled, the kind that calms audiences and diffuses conflicts. At first glance, she looked like the solution to that small incident. Susanna descended one step at a time, maintaining perfect posture. There was no hurry, no visible tension. She glanced briefly at the boy, then at the cell phones, and only then at billionaire CEO Sebastian. The smile remained, but something about it was too rigid. "Poor thing," she said in a sweet tone, as if speaking about a lost animal. The word carried no compassion, only distance. She approached the boy and lowered her body slightly, just enough to appear empathetic in front of the cameras. "This isn't a place for you," she continued, her voice too soft to be sincere. The gesture looked kind, but there was poison in the excess care. Susanna did not want to solve the problem. She wanted to erase it, turn it into manageable noise. The boy did not respond immediately. He simply looked at her, attentive. It was a different look from the one he had given billionaire CEO Sebastian. There was no plea, no challenge. There was recognition. As if he saw something behind the smile that no one else there perceived. That subtly changed the atmosphere. Susanna noticed. "We don't need a scandal," she added, now with a slight hardening of her tone. The sentence was not a request. It was a warning. The cameras kept recording and she knew it. Public embarrassment was the perfect tool. Any wrong reaction could be used against the boy. Some guests nodded, relieved to see someone in control. The elegant, polite bride resolving a social problem without raising her voice. The spectacle seemed to recompose itself. But billionaire CEO Sebastian felt something out of place. Susanna did not look at the boy like someone who cared. She looked like someone protecting a secret. She cast a quick glance at the lawyer, almost imperceptible but loaded with meaning. A look of confirmation. Of continuity. As if to say everything was still according to plan. Billionaire CEO Sebastian caught the gesture, even without fully understanding it. It did not feel like a spontaneous reaction. "Let's go inside," Susanna said, now addressing billionaire CEO Sebastian directly, extending her hand with rehearsed naturalness. "This is getting ugly." The word ugly did not refer to the situation but to the exposure. The problem was not what was happening but who was watching. The boy took a small step to the side, blocking the path again. He did not touch her, did not raise his voice. He simply occupied the space. The simple gesture dismantled the attempt at control. Susanna lost her smile for a second, too fast for most to notice, but long enough for billionaire CEO Sebastian to see. It was at that moment that the boy decided to say something different. Something that did not come from the street, nor from improvisation. A word that did not match his appearance, nor his age, nor the place the world had reserved for him. A word that should not be there. And that was about to change everything. The boy lifted his gaze not toward the cameras, but directly at billionaire CEO Sebastian. The noise around them seemed to fade for a moment, as if the entire environment had lost focus. When he spoke, there was no haste or nervousness. The word came out clean, precise, out of place in that street-level setting. Mirror clause. Short. Cold. Final. The effect was immediate. Billionaire CEO Sebastian felt his body react before his mind could understand. It was impossible. That expression did not circulate outside sealed rooms, bulletproof contracts, and meetings protected by absolute confidentiality. His face lost its neutrality for a second. A second too long for someone who had always controlled his emotions in public. Some guests frowned, unable to grasp the weight of it. To them they were just two strange words. To billionaire CEO Sebastian they were a maximum alert signal. He remembered exactly where he had heard them. A silent office. A specific lawyer. A conversation that should never have left that room. Susanna noticed the change immediately. Her smile froze halfway like a cracked mask. Her eyes instinctively searched for the lawyer, almost involuntarily. It was a quick movement but a revealing one. The kind of reflex that happens when someone is caught off script. "What are you talking about?" she said, trying to regain control. The tone was still soft, but now tension lay beneath it. It was not curiosity. It was containment. The boy did not answer her. He continued looking only at billionaire CEO Sebastian, as if Susanna no longer held authority in that moment. "It's the part that activates after the ceremony," the boy added, with the calm of someone who knows exactly what he is saying. He did not explain everything. He did not need to. Billionaire CEO Sebastian felt his stomach tighten. This could not be coincidence. Could not be a guess. It was internal information. The lawyer stepped forward too quickly. "This is absurd," he said with rehearsed firmness. But his posture had changed. His shoulders were tense, his jaw rigid. He did not look indignant. He looked worried. The difference was subtle but glaring to anyone paying attention. Susanna tried to laugh, a short, artificial laugh. "Children say anything," she said, looking around, seeking support from the crowd. But no one laughed with her. The silence was now heavy. Billionaire CEO Sebastian did not take his eyes off the boy. Something inside him had already understood that this warning did not come from chance. "You shouldn't know that," billionaire CEO Sebastian finally said in a low voice. It was not an accusation. It was a realization. The boy tilted his head slightly as if confirming something obvious. He knew exactly what that sentence meant. The cameras kept recording, but the scene was no longer about spectacle. It was about something hidden rising to the surface. The bride, the lawyer, billionaire CEO Sebastian, and a boy from the street connected by information that should not exist outside of paper. And before anyone could end it once and for all, the boy prepared to say something even more specific. Something that would turn suspicion into certainty. A name that was not on the invitations nor in the speeches, but that carried a promise of consequence. The lawyer was the first to try to shut it down in a practical way. He straightened his posture, adjusted his jacket, and adopted the tone of someone accustomed to controlling difficult situations. "This has gone too far," he said, looking around more at the cameras than at the people. The sentence did not seek justice, it sought speed. The faster it ended, the better. Susanna followed with a step forward, reclaiming the smile now seemingly glued to her face. "It's just nonsense," she remarked with exaggerated lightness. The word was chosen carefully. Nonsense diminishes, infantilizes, disarms. At least that was the intention. But something in the environment no longer accepted that framing. Billionaire CEO Sebastian remained silent. He was observing, not just listening but connecting invisible dots. The lawyer and Susanna spoke too much, too fast, like people trying to plug a leak before it turned into a flood. No one there denied anything forcefully. No one said, "That's impossible." They only asked to go inside quickly. "Let's continue with the ceremony," the lawyer insisted, now in a harsher tone. "This is a public event." The subtext was clear. It was not about truth, it was about image. The presence of cameras turned every second into reputational risk. Susanna moved closer again to billionaire CEO Sebastian and took his arm with rehearsed delicacy. "We'll talk later," she whispered as if offering reassurance. But her eyes were tense. It was not calm. It was restraint. Like someone holding a door that threatened to open on its own. The boy watched everything in silence. He did not need to speak at that moment. Their reaction said more than any explanation. Crossed glances, vague phrases, artificial urgency. All of it confirmed what he already knew. And billionaire CEO Sebastian was beginning to perceive the same. One guest coughed, another adjusted a phone, someone murmured that something felt off. The audience sensed that something did not fit. The attempt at normality only made everything more suspicious. The more they asked for haste, the more time seemed to stall. The lawyer cast a quick glance at the security guards, a silent command. They took half a step forward, gauging the distance to the boy. The mood shifted again. The attempt at a peaceful conclusion was starting to turn into force. "This doesn't need to turn into a mess," Susanna said, now with a firmer tone. It was no longer a request. It was a warning. Billionaire CEO Sebastian felt her hand tighten slightly on his arm, as if urging him to move forward without thinking. But something inside him resisted. For the first time he did not move when they expected him to. The hesitation was minimal but visible. And in that silent game, hesitation was a dangerous signal. The boy lifted his gaze once more, prepared for the next piece of that puzzle. If they tried to silence him, he would have to advance. And the next step would not be just a technical term. Would be a name. The boy took a deep breath before speaking, as someone measuring the weight of what he was about to release into the air. It was not dramatization. It was precision. He did not raise his voice, did not seek the camera's attention. He simply said the name, dry, in the tone of someone confirming an appointment. Montalvo. The word dropped into the space between them like a final piece forced into place. Billionaire CEO Sebastian felt the impact immediately. Not because the name was unfamiliar, but precisely because it was not. Montalvo was not someone mentioned in public, much less in that context. It was a name associated with private conversations, discreet intermediaries, confirmations made far from official records. A name that always came with deadlines and consequences. Susanna reacted a second too late. Her eyes widened before her face could reassemble the mask. It was quick, almost imperceptible, but real. The lawyer looked down at the ground as if recalculating something. No one there asked, "Who?" And that said everything. "The confirmation comes after the mass," the boy added, as if reading from an agenda already decided. He did not explain what nor how. He did not need to. Billionaire CEO Sebastian understood that there was a plan with a scheduled time, a trigger that would be pulled at the right moment, when there would no longer be any way to retreat without serious losses. The noise of the guests returned in short, nervous waves. Disconnected whispers, poorly formed questions, attempts to understand without really knowing what to ask. The cameras moved even closer. The spectacle was now something else. No longer a wedding. It was pure tension. "This is absurd," the lawyer said, but his voice faltered at the end. There was no conviction. Only urgency. He tried to smile at someone in the audience as if seeking support, but no one responded. The environment no longer obeyed the usual hierarchies. Susanna took a step back, adjusting her dress with an automatic gesture. "He's making it up," she said too quickly. The sentence sounded defensive. Billionaire CEO Sebastian realized something essential in that instant. She was not confused. She was irritated. Like someone whose timeline had been exposed ahead of schedule. The boy remained firm, occupying that minimal space with an impossible-to-displace presence. "Once you go in, there's no way to stop it," he added. It was a final warning, not a threat. A reminder that some doors, once crossed, only close at too high a cost. Billionaire CEO Sebastian felt the weight of all the pieces locking into place. The ceremony, the urgency, the resistance to any delay, the exchanged looks. Everything pointed to a strike that depended exactly on that step forward. On that solemn entrance before the cameras. Susanna tried to use the environment as a weapon. "They're filming," she said in a low voice, leaning toward Billionaire CEO Sebastian. It was not concern. It was pressure. Public exposure was part of the plan, not a risk. He realized that in the same instant. And in that suspended second, it became clear that the embarrassment was not a side effect. It was the mechanism. The stage had been chosen for a reason. And now, with the right name spoken out loud, the game had shifted to a new phase. Susanna realized she had lost control of the narrative and changed strategy. If she could not persuade with a smile, she would persuade through embarrassment. She discreetly pointed to the cell phones around them, as if reminding everyone of an invisible rule. "Everyone is filming," she said in a low but calculated tone. It was not a warning. It was a threat wrapped in politeness. The audience became a weapon. The effect was immediate. Some guests adjusted their framing, others stepped closer, sensing that something big was about to happen. The presence of the cameras ceased to be neutral. It became pressure. Every second spent standing there increased the risk of interpretations, headlines, and clips taken out of context. Susanna knew that better than anyone. Billionaire CEO Sebastian felt the trap closing in from the quietest side. There were no handcuffs, no contracts in sight, only stares. The kind of imprisonment that works through reputation. He knew that game well. That was how questionable deals survived in daylight. They turned any retreat into public weakness. "Let's go inside," Susanna insisted, now without disguising the urgency. The sweet tone was gone. What remained was the coldness of someone counting on the environment to crush resistance. The ceremony had to happen not for love, but because the camera demanded continuity. Stopping there meant admitting doubt. And doubt in that world was expensive. The boy watched everything attentively, understanding something many adults ignored. It was not about convincing billionaire CEO Sebastian. It was about pushing him until he moved on his own. The cameras were not there by chance. The spectacle had to be complete for the blow to be accepted as normality. The lawyer moved closer, almost pressing against billionaire CEO Sebastian's ear. "This is getting out of control," he murmured. The sentence carried an implicit request. "Move forward. Fix it. We'll deal with the consequences later." That was how bad decisions became permanent. Susanna crossed her arms for a moment, a small but revealing gesture. She was not worried about the boy. She was worried about the delay. Time was an essential component of the plan. The longer they waited, the greater the chance that something would slip out of control. Billionaire CEO Sebastian looked around. He saw anxious faces, phones pointed, expectations hungry for a conclusion. He realized they were trying to push him into the church not with physical force, but with social shame. An invisible push, but an effective one. The boy took another step forward, interrupting the psychological advance. "That's why they want you to go in now," he said without raising his voice. The sentence cut through the tension like a blade. Some guests held their breath. The lawyer's expression hardened. Susanna reacted quickly. "Enough," she said, losing control for the first time. The word came out dry. Without theater. Without a filter. And in that instant, it became clear that the exposure was not just scenery. It was method. A mechanism designed to crush any resistance in silence. The security guards moved almost at the same time, waiting for a clear signal. The pressure had reached its limit. If the boy was not removed now, someone would lose control. And the next move would not be made with words. The signal did not need to be spoken. One of the security guards stepped forward with his hand outstretched, determined to remove the boy before things became uncontrollable. The movement was quick, trained, designed to look firm, not violent. But the moment his hand touched the boy's arm, everything unraveled. The boy dodged by reflex, his foot slipped on the stone step, and his balance was lost for a dangerous second. The small body fell sideways, hitting the railing. A sharp sound cut through the air. Some guests screamed, others instinctively stepped back. The camera shook, but they did not stop recording. Chaos had begun. One guard tried to hold him, another moved in too quickly, and the attempt at control turned into open confusion. Susanna reacted with a sudden step forward. "Get him out of here now," she said, no longer caring about her tone. There was no sweetness, no performance. It was an order. Her face hardened, her eyes fixed and cold. That was not the smiling bride. It was someone defending a plan on the verge of collapse. In the middle of the confusion, a hooded man emerged from the side, coming from where no one had been watching. His movement was fast, far too precise to be casual. While the security guard struggled with the boy, he lunged forward with his arm outstretched, trying to grab him by the shoulder. The gesture was calculated to disappear into the chaos. Billionaire CEO Sebastian saw the movement before he understood the reason. Something about that man did not fit the rest of the scene. He was not a guest, not security, not a curious bystander. He was functional. Billionaire CEO Sebastian moved without thinking, grabbing the hooded man's arm at the last instant. "Let go," the man growled, trying to pull free. The hood slipped partially, revealing a tense face, far too focused for an ordinary person. His presence confirmed what the boy had been trying to say from the beginning. This was not improvisation. It was execution. The boy managed to brace himself on the ground and stand up, breathing hard but conscious. His eyes met billionaire CEO Sebastian's for a second, heavy with meaning. There was no gratitude. There was renewed urgency. The plan had moved into its physical phase. Guests began to back away in a block, creating a chaotic corridor. Some shouted for security, others asked for calm, but no one truly knew what was happening. The spectacle had lost its polish. Now it was pure instinct. Susanna stepped back 2 paces, surprised for the first time. This was no longer under her control. The hooded man broke free with a hard pull and disappeared to the side, swallowed by the crowd. The damage, however, was already done. The attempt to remove the boy by force had been exposed. Billionaire CEO Sebastian felt his heart race. It was not fear. It was clarity. He understood that if he entered that church, something irreversible would happen. And it would not be merely symbolic. The boy had been targeted. That changed everything. With the environment on the verge of collapse and the cameras recording every second, billionaire CEO Sebastian made a decision no one expected. He turned toward the side door of the church, ignoring the altar, ignoring the stairs, ignoring the script. And he gestured for the boy to follow him. The choice did not end the conflict. On the contrary, it merely shifted the war to a place where the spectacle would no longer have control, and where truths spoken away from the cameras could finally surface. Billionaire CEO Sebastian did not hesitate. He ignored the murmur behind him and led the boy through the church's side door, a narrow, dimly lit passage far from the flowers, the cameras, and the hungry stares. The sound of chaos became muffled as the door closed. Inside, the air felt heavier, older, as if the walls held secrets never meant for the public. The boy walked quickly, even while limping slightly. He did not complain, did not dramatize. He simply followed, like someone who knew that this was the last safe space before everything collapsed. Billionaire CEO Sebastian noticed his condition but did not stop. Urgency spoke louder than any immediate care. The sacristy appeared ahead, far too simple for someone accustomed to luxury. A wooden table, a few worn chairs, old cabinets. Nothing there seemed important. Precisely because of that, it was invisible. The kind of place where real conversations happen far from performance. Billionaire CEO Sebastian closed the door carefully and turned to the boy. For the first time since everything began, there was no audience. No image strategy. Just two worlds colliding in silence. "Now you're going to tell me everything," he said, without authority, without threat. Just precision. The boy took a deep breath, leaning on the table. "I heard it," he began, "just like that." He explained that he slept near an abandoned commercial building, a place where important people went late at night thinking no one was paying attention. A place where conversations echoed more than they imagined. He had not tried to listen. The words had found him. He described voices, schedules, scattered phrases that repeated themselves. He spoke of papers, activations, a foundation used as a bridge. Each detail seemed small on its own, but together they formed a disturbing picture. Billionaire CEO Sebastian recognized the pattern. It was legal engineering disguised as romance. "I didn't understand everything," the boy admitted. "But I understood that I had to stop you from going in." The sentence carried no heroism. It was a statement of fact. Billionaire CEO Sebastian felt something tighten in his chest. This was not paranoia. It was a legitimate warning. The boy explained that he had tried to warn other people before, but no one listened. No one wanted to listen to someone like him. The wedding was the last possible moment. After the ceremony, everything would be automatic. Activations, indirect signatures, irreversible consequences. Billionaire CEO Sebastian walked slowly around the small room, processing every word. Choosing the side door had been instinctive, but now it proved rational. If he had gone in, he would have been trapped in a legal script he would only understand when it was too late. Outside, the distant sound of voices still echoed. But inside, the truth was beginning to take shape. The boy did not bring absolute certainty. He brought fragments. And often, fragments are enough to prevent a catastrophe. Billionaire CEO Sebastian stopped and faced the boy again. "Do you have any proof?" he asked, already knowing he needed more than testimony. The boy did not answer immediately. He simply pointed to the old backpack leaning against the wall. The simple gesture changed the weight of the room. Because if there was something physical in there, something tangible, this would cease to be just a warning. It would become a real confrontation. And the next step would require far more than courage. The boy crouched carefully and opened the old backpack, as if handling something too fragile to be rushed. The zipper jammed for a second, heightening the tension in the tight silence of the sacristy. When it finally opened, he pulled out a piece of paper folded many times, crumpled at the edges, but preserved with almost religious care. He placed the paper on the wooden table, smoothing it with the palm of his hand. It was not a full document, just a tear. A fragment ripped hastily. Even so, the words that appeared were enough to chill the room. Technical terms jumped out: immediate activation, conditional validity, intermediary foundation. At the bottom, a partial name that left no doubt about its origin. Billionaire CEO Sebastian moved closer slowly. He recognized the format, the language, the kind of wording used in shielded contracts. This did not come from a child's imagination. It was real paper with vocabulary that circulated only in very specific environments. His stomach tightened when he noticed the signature cut in half, yet still identifiable. "It was in the trash," the boy explained. "They tore it up thinking no one would put it back together." The sentence was spoken without pride, without drama. It was simply a fact. Billionaire CEO Sebastian felt a strange mix of shock and clarity. It was carelessness. And carelessness topples empires. The boy continued rummaging through the backpack and pulled out another item. A thin, yellowed envelope marked by moisture. Inside were loose handwritten notes with dates and times. Among them, the name Montalvo appeared again, now accompanied by a direct reference to the ceremony. It was not theory. It was a schedule. Billionaire CEO Sebastian ran his fingers over the paper as if confirming that it was real. The texture, the smell, the wear. Everything screamed authenticity. This was not a story. It was material. Physical evidence. Something that completely changed the game. Outside, hurried footsteps echoed down the corridor. Distant voices called Billionaire CEO Sebastian's name. The pressure of the outside world was beginning to seep into that small space. He knew time was running out. If that evidence fell into the wrong hands, it would disappear. The boy closed the backpack and pulled it close to his body instinctively. He had already lost too much to trust chance. "There's more," he said, lowering his voice. "But not here." His look signaled immediate danger. Billionaire CEO Sebastian understood. This needed to leave there now. It was not enough to have proof. It had to be protected. And the boy had to be protected too. From that moment on, they were no longer just preventing a scheme. They were becoming targets. He carefully gathered the papers and slipped them inside his jacket, feeling their symbolic weight against his chest. The sacristy, which had seemed like a refuge moments before, was now beginning to feel like a trap. When Billionaire CEO Sebastian cautiously opened the side door, he realized the silence in the corridor was not reassuring. It was watchful. Someone knew they were there. And they did not intend to let them leave with that evidence without a reaction. The boy pulled up his hood and stepped forward, already knowing the way. "We need to go out through the back," he said. "Now." The corridor felt narrower than before, as if the church itself had decided to tighten the trap. Billionaire CEO Sebastian moved forward with controlled steps, alert to every sound, while the boy guided him toward the back exit. That was when Susanna's voice rose behind them, too clean for that ancient space. "Where do you think you're going?" she asked, unhurried, like someone who already knew the answer. She stood at the exact distance to be heard but not touched. The impeccable dress contrasted with the tension of the moment. There was no longer a smile. There was no audience. The mask had fallen completely. "You're making a mistake," she continued, now looking directly at Billionaire CEO Sebastian. The tone was not a plea. It was a calculated warning. Billionaire CEO Sebastian turned slowly. "A mistake is what you were trying to do to me," he replied, feeling for the first time that he did not need to measure his words. Susanna smirked, a short, dangerous smile. "That's called an agreement," she corrected. "And agreements have consequences when they're broken." She took a step forward and lowered her voice slightly. She spoke of foundations, of frozen donations, of headlines already prepared. She spoke of reputation as if listing tools. Each sentence was an elegant threat, built so as not to sound like a crime. The boy listened in silence, understanding that this was the confession no one recorded. "You have no idea what you could lose," Susanna said. Billionaire CEO Sebastian answered without raising his voice. "I already know exactly what I was going to lose if I walked into that church." The sentence hung between them like a final line. Susanna shifted her focus and stared at the boy. "You have no idea what you're getting yourself into," she said coldly. "Social work deals with inconvenient children." The threat was delivered with chilling naturalness. It did not need to be explicit. Billionaire CEO Sebastian felt his body tense. That crossed every acceptable line. The boy did not step back. He only tightened the backpack against his body. "That's why I kept everything," he replied. The simplicity of the sentence dismantled her superiority for a second. Susanna realized she had said too much. Footsteps echoed at the far end of the corridor. They were not lost guests. They were quick, coordinated. Susanna glanced toward the sound and then looked back at Billionaire CEO Sebastian. "Last chance," she said. There was no more theater. Only urgency. Billionaire CEO Sebastian turned away without answering. The decision was made. Susanna stood still, watching them move away, her face hard, recalculating routes. This was not over there. It had only changed shape. When they reached the service exit, the street air hit like a shock. A dark car was parked across the way, engine running. It was no coincidence. Billionaire CEO Sebastian felt the danger accelerate. The boy tugged at his sleeve and pointed to the left. "Not that way," he said. "That's where they always think it is." The sentence sounded like experience, not intuition. They changed direction at the last second, disappearing among ordinary people, while the car pulled out behind them trying to keep up. The game had left the church. And now, far from the spectacle, there were no visible rules anymore. From that moment on, it was no longer about stopping a wedding. It was about surviving with the right evidence until the right place. And the next step would require trust in someone outside that circle of power. The dark car reappeared 2 blocks later, gliding between vehicles like a patient predator. Billionaire CEO Sebastian noticed it in the reflection of a closed shop window. It wasn't an open chase. It was a shadow. The kind of surveillance that waits for the other person's mistake. The boy quickened his pace and turned onto a side street without looking back, far too confident for someone so young. They entered the old terminal, a place where too many people nullify any attempt at direct surveillance. The sound of footsteps, metallic announcements and overlapping conversations created a perfect cloak of anonymity. Billionaire CEO Sebastian slowed his pace, understanding the logic. Those who run draw attention. Those who blend and survive. The boy led the way with surprising precision. He passed broken turnstiles, narrow corridors, dimly lit stairways. This wasn't improvisation. It was familiar territory. He stopped in front of a set of old metal lockers, nearly forgotten. He pulled a bent key from his pocket, worn down from excessive use. "They think I just listen," he said as he opened the locker. "But I keep things." From inside he took out a small sealed envelope and a simple flash drive, wrapped in plastic. Nothing flashy. Nothing too advanced. Precisely because of that, invisible. Billionaire CEO Sebastian felt the symbolic weight of that object in his hand. A cheap flash drive carrying something capable of tearing down entire structures. The boy explained that he had recorded conversations once he realized they always talked at the same times. He didn't understand everything, but he understood enough to know it couldn't disappear. On the other side of the terminal, 2 men stopped for too long, pretending to check the schedule board. Billionaire CEO Sebastian recognized the pattern. "It's time," he said. The boy nodded and closed the locker with deliberate calm, as if every controlled second were an act of resistance. They moved again, blending into the arriving crowd. The dark car appeared outside, rolling slowly, scanning faces. Too late. The terminal had swallowed them. The boy pointed to a secondary exit. "She's going to try to discredit everything," he said, without looking at billionaire CEO Sebastian. "She'll say I made it up." The sentence carried no fear. It carried preparation. Billionaire CEO Sebastian understood this wasn't just an escape. It was a strategy. They exited through a side door and got into an old taxi parked nearby. The driver asked no questions. Billionaire CEO Sebastian gave a short, precise address. A name that didn't appear on public lists. A place where protocols mattered more than influence. As the car pulled away, billionaire CEO Sebastian held the flash drive tightly. It was the line between theater and formal truth. Between threat and real consequence. The boy rested his head against the window for a second, exhausted but alert. "Now it's with her," he said. He didn't explain who. He didn't need to. The next chapter was already in motion. And in that brief silence before the next storm, billionaire CEO Sebastian knew the final battle would not be in the streets. It would be in a cold room with papers, records, and people accustomed to turning truth into process. Ana Silva's office had no luxury, and that was intentional. Frosted glass, light-colored walls, organized desks with no ostentation. A place where nothing distracted from what mattered. Billionaire CEO Sebastian entered with the boy right behind him, feeling the shift in atmosphere like crossing an invisible border. Their power did not come from money, it came from procedure. Ana Silva listened to everything in silence, without interrupting. She did not ask questions in the middle, did not show surprise. She simply took notes, mentally organizing each piece as someone who could already see the entire board. When the flash drive was placed on the desk, she did not touch it immediately. First, she asked for dates, times, locations. Then she asked for the envelope. Everything followed a precise ritual. The audio was listened to through headphones without an audience. Familiar voices emerged, far too clear to deny. Legal terms, deadlines, the so-called mirror clause explained coldly. The foundation appeared as an instrument, not a social cause. The name Montalvo surfaced with unsettling naturalness. There was no doubt. It was planning. Ana Silva immediately made copies, registered everything under official protocol, and activated contacts that did not appear in public directories. Billionaire CEO Sebastian watched in silence, understanding that this was the moment when control changed hands. There was no more improvisation. Now there was a trail. The attempt to react came quickly. A representative from the social work, organization appeared, claiming protection of the minor. The approach was too clean, too rehearsed. Ana Silva did not waver. She requested documents, contacted the council, and recorded the attempt. Every move they made became additional evidence. Minutes later the police arrived. Not with spectacle but with procedure. And with them came Victor, Montalvo, and Susana, drawn in by the very urgency of trying to contain what could no longer be contained. The atmosphere grew heavy. No one raised their voice. There was no need. Susana tried to take control one last time, speaking of misunderstandings, agreements, unnecessary damage. Ana Silva cut her off with a short sentence. Everything you say now will be added to the record. Silence fell like a sentence. The audio from the flash drive was played aloud. Not to embarrass, but to document. The words echoed clearly. Clause. Activation. Foundation. Confirmation after the ceremony. The theater collapsed without shouting, without scandal. Just facts. Victor looked away. Montalvo tried to argue interpretation. Susana remained motionless. Billionaire CEO Sebastian felt something rare. Not victory but clarity. The wedding would not happen. The plan was over. And what came next would not be settled with money. As the room began to empty, the boy remained seated, quiet. Ana Silva approached him and said only, "Now you are protected." Not as an empty promise but as a documented commitment. Billionaire CEO Sebastian looked at the boy and understood that the warning at the church door had not saved just a wedding. It had exposed predators who relied on silence, haste, and spectacle. Nothing there felt like a classic happy ending. But it was the end of a trap. And the beginning of something no one in that church would dare call coincidence. In the end, it wasn't money that saved billionaire CEO Sebastian. It wasn't status. It wasn't power. It was the decision to stop and listen to someone the entire world insisted on ignoring. How many traps are still working today because no one wants to seem inconvenient? How many truths are discarded simply because they come from the wrong mouth, the wrong body, the wrong place? And how many perfect decisions only seem right because no one had the courage to interrupt the spectacle? Maybe the greatest danger isn't in hidden clauses or cold contracts, but in the rush to move forward when something inside you says that something is wrong. And you, would you have walked into that church? Or would you have stopped to listen to the warning no one wanted to hear? If this story made you think, comment below what you would have done in his place. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications because the next story might show exactly what happens when no one interrupts the trap in time.